For our self-portraits, we are going to be using the grid method, breaking up both our drawing paper and our photograph into smaller boxes in order to help make it easier to transfer information accurately. We are going to be starting with our drawing paper, and you want to make sure that your paper is positioned vertically. This paper is 8 by 10, and we're going to be measuring out 2-inch square grid boxes. So please just trust me on this. What I'm showing you is in order to ensure that our lines are straight. So if you line up the ruler with the edge of the paper, we are going to make small marks at 2 inches, 4 inches, and 6 inches. Let's make sure that we are doing this part lightly. All right, after you have done that, you want to drop your ruler down a little bit lower to the second half of your paper, and you want to make marks at those same measurements. So those again are 2, 4, and 6 inches. After you have done that, you're going to rotate the ruler, and we're going to line it up with those marks that you have made, and you're going to draw lines down lightly. Once you are done, you should have 4 columns of equal width on your paper. After you have gotten those lines down, we are going to rotate our paper to the side so that it is horizontal, and we're going to be doing something that's very, very similar. All right, so once again, you want to line up the ruler with the end of your paper. I'm just going to put it directly on this grid line that I drew just as a guideline. And then we are going to make small marks at 2, at 4, 6, and because this side is longer, also at 8 inches. All right, after you have done that, go ahead and drop your ruler down a little bit further down the paper. I'm going to use the bottom grid line as my guideline, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to make small marks at 2, at 4, at 6, and at 8. And after you have done that, just like we did in the other direction, we are going to line our ruler up with those small marks in order to draw in our grid lines going in this direction. All right, so you can go ahead and rotate your paper back so that it is vertical. When you are done with your measurements, you should have 20 boxes of equal size on your paper. Our grid boxes are smaller in size, and we have more of them than last year's animal grid drawing because we are drawing more complex subject matter. After you are done with your drawing paper, you can go ahead and push that off to the side and grab your photograph. Now, for your photograph, I usually like to switch to a pen because it definitely is harder to see the grid lines with pencil on a photograph, especially if your photograph has darker ink, darker pigment on it like mine does. So I do want to make sure we understand this entire paper is 8 by 10, so it's the same size. We're drawing the same grid. Even if you have a white border around your paper, you're including that portion in the measurements. I cut your entire paper down to 8 by 10. All right, so we're gonna do the same thing. I am lining up my ruler. I'm gonna use the white part so that I can actually see it up here. I am going to line up the ruler with the edge of the paper, making sure that my photograph is vertical, and we're going to draw those marks at 2, at 4, and at 6. And then same thing, I am going to drop it down lower. I'm going to try and drop it down to a part where I can actually see my marks being made. And we're going to make marks at 2, 4, and 6. After you have done that, rotate your ruler, line up your marks, line up your ruler with the marks the best that you can, and draw those grid lines in. If you want to make sure you did it correctly and you're sure that your drawing paper is correct, go ahead and just line them up. Make sure that they match. If they don't match, that's going to cause some major proportional issues for your drawing. Moving that drawing paper out of the side, go ahead and rotate your photograph to the side. We're gonna do the same thing. All right, so line up your ruler with the edge of the paper. I, again, am going to use what's on the top grid line for me as a guide. We're drawing lines at 2, 4, 6, and 8. Drop your ruler down further. Same thing. Small marks at 2, 4, 6, and 8. And then for the last time, we are going to line up the ruler with those marks and draw the grid lines in. All right, and then you're done with the ruler at that point and the pen if you used it. You can do the same thing with your paper. Make sure that your grid lines match up so that you are sure that you have done this accurately. While many of us used the grid last year in order to complete our animal grid drawings, let's do a quick reminder of what's expected when you're doing a grid drawing. You might choose to use the grid in a different way. I just hope that you're actually using it to help with accuracy. What I personally like to do is check and see what information is in each grid box. Ignore the background for now. You are going to be choosing the background that you want to include, so you are only drawing yourself, your face, your shoulders, that kind of thing. So in my first grid square, I do not have any information that includes me. I only have the background and some of the white border. So I'm gonna switch to the second grid square where I have a small amount of the headband that I'm wearing along with some of the hair. So you wanna see about how much space everything takes up and use those lines in order to help you draw it in accurately. You do not want to do any shading at this point. You are just doing the outline. You're just doing the outline of everything in order to make sure that you can get everything placed correctly. All right, and then you keep going. So I'm gonna move on to the next grid square. Go ahead and get those things drawn in. And guys, things are going to change. I'm sure that I am going to come back and look at some of these things and say, oh, that's not quite right. I need to make sure that things are connected a little bit better. But use the grid to help you with accuracy. If you ignore the grid, I can almost guarantee that your drawing will not be accurate.